The rain came down in sheets, turning the city's sidewalks into slick mirrors that reflected the neon glow of shop signs and streetlights. Under the awning of a shuttered deli, a woman huddled, her thin frame shivering against the damp chill. Her name was Leela, though no one had called her by it in months. To the passers-by who barely glanced her way, she was just another shadow, another ghost the city had forgotten. Her arms cradled a small bundle-ear baby, no more than 6 months old, wrapped in a frayed blanket that smelled faintly of mildew. The infant's tiny chest rose and fell, her soft breaths the only warmth Leela could cling to in the storm. Leela's eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, darted nervously as a police cruiser slowed near the curb. Her grip on the baby tightened. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain's relentless patter. "Please don't take her." The words weren't meant for the cops, as she didn't think they could hear her, but for some unseen force, some cruel hand of fate she'd been dodging for months. The cruiser lingered a moment, its red and blue lights cutting through the downpour, then rolled on, disappearing into the night. Leela exhaled, her breath trembling, but the relief was fleeting. She knew they'd be back. They always came back. She shifted, trying to keep the rain from seeping into the blanket. Her daughter, Ellie, stirred, letting out a small whimper. Leela's heart clenched. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and her milk was drying up. The thought of Ellie going hungry again twisted like a knife in her gut. She tried the shelters, but they were overflowing, and the last one had turned her away when they saw the baby. No room for kids, they'd said, their eyes avoiding hers. She tried begging, too, but the city was hard, and most people hurried past, their faces buried in their phones or their collars. A few had tossed coins, but not enough for a meal, let alone a place to sleep. Leela's gaze drifted to the towering glass building across the street. Its sleek lines and glowing windows screamed money, power, a world she'd never touch. The sign out front read Vance Enterprises. She'd seen it 100 times, passed it on her endless walks through the city, but tonight it felt like a taunt. Inside, people were warm, dry, safe. Inside, no one was hungry. She pressed her lips to Ellie's forehead, whispering, "We're gonna be okay, baby, I promise." But the words felt hollow, like a prayer to a god who'd stopped listening. Across the street, in a penthouse office 50 floors up, Ethan Vance stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the city below. At 35, he was everything the world admired, a self-made millionaire, CEO of Vance Enterprises, a man who'd clawed his way from a one-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood to a life of tailored suits and private jets. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, but his gray eyes carried a weight that no amount of success could lighten. He was a single father, widowed 3 years ago when his wife, Claire, died in a car accident. Their son, Noah, was 5 now, and Ethan poured everything into him, every late night, every deal, every dollar. But tonight, Noah was with his nanny, and Ethan was alone, the hum of the city below a reminder of how empty his victories felt. He'd been about to leave, his briefcase already packed, when movement caught his eye. A figure under the deli's awning, barely visible through the rain. He squinted, his hand resting on the window's cool glass. A woman, he realized, holding something close. A child. His chest tightened. He knew the city's underbelly, had grown up in it. He'd seen people like her before, people the world chewed up and spit out. But something about her, about the way she curled protectively over the bundle in her arms, wouldn't let him look away. Ethan grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. His assistant, Marla, glanced up from her desk. "Mr. Vance, you're leaving?" "The board's expecting those projections by tomorrow," he said, his voice clipped but not unkind. "Send them tomorrow." Marla blinked but didn't argue. Ethan wasn't the type to explain himself. Outside, the rain hit him like a slap, soaking through his wool coat in seconds. He crossed the street, his polished shoes splashing through puddles. As he approached, Leela's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. She scrambled to her feet, clutching Ellie so tightly the baby whimpered. "Stay back," Leela said, her voice cracking but fierce. "I'm not doing anything wrong." Ethan stopped a few feet away, hands raised. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, keeping his tone soft, the way he did when Noah woke from a nightmare. "I just a broken bar saw you from my office. You looked like you needed help." Leela's gaze darted from his face to his expensive coat, his polished shoes, then back to his eyes. She didn't trust him. Why would she? Men like him didn't stop for women like her. "We're fine," she said, but her voice shook, and Ellie's whimpers grew louder. The baby was cold, hungry, and Leela's arms trembled from holding her so long. Ethan took a cautious step closer, rain dripping from his hair. "You're not fine," he said gently. "It's freezing out here." "Your baby." "Don't talk about my baby," Leela snapped, her voice rising. "You don't know us. You don't know anything." Tears welled in her eyes, mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "They're gonna take her. They keep trying to take her." "Who's trying to take her?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowing. Leela's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan had heard the story. Social services, overwhelmed and underfunded, often separated kids from parents who couldn't provide. He'd seen it growing up, watched friends' families torn apart. He didn't know this woman's story, but he knew the system wasn't kind to people like her. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "I'm not with them. I just want to help. There's a diner a block over. Let me get you something to eat, somewhere warm to sit for a bit. No strings." Leela stared at him, her instincts screaming to run, but her body was too tired, too hungry. Ellie's cries were growing desperate, and the thought of her daughter suffering another minute in the cold broke something in her. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you care?" Ethan hesitated, the rain drumming against his shoulders. He didn't have a good answer, not one that would make sense to her. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't the type to hand out kindness to strangers. But something about the way she held her daughter, the raw fear in her voice here reminded him of Claire, of the fierce love she'd had for Noah. He couldn't walk away. "Not tonight." "Because I can," he said finally. "Please, let me help." Leela's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. She nodded, barely perceptible, and followed him, keeping her distance. The diner was a small, greasy spoon called Al's, its neon sign flickering in the rain. Inside, it smelled of coffee and fried onions, and the warmth hit Leela like a wave. She hesitated at the door, clutching Ellie, but Ethan held it open, his expression unreadable. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a smoker's rasp, didn't bat an eye at Leela's soaked clothes or Ethan's dripping coat. "Booth in the back's open," she said, jerking her thumb toward the corner. Ethan led the way, and Leela slid into the booth, keeping Ellie close. The baby had quieted, her tiny face pressed against Leela's chest. Ethan ordered coffee and a plate of pancakes for Leela without asking, then added a bowl of soup and some toast. "Eat what you want," he said. "It's on me." Leela didn't touch the food at first, her eyes scanning the room like she expected someone to burst in and drag her out. But when the pancakes arrived, steaming and golden, her stomach growled so loudly she flinched. She tore off a small piece, chewed it slowly, then broke off another for Ellie, softening it in her mouth before feeding it to her. Ethan watched, saying nothing, his coffee untouched. "What's her name?" he asked after a long silence. Leela's eyes flicked to him, wary. "Ellie," she said softly. "Her name's Ellie." "She's beautiful," Ethan said, and he meant it. The baby had her mother's dark eyes, wide and curious despite the exhaustion in them. Leela's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "She's all I got," she said, her voice cracking. "They keep saying I can't take care of her, but I can. I just a broken bar. I just need a chance." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Who's a they?" he asked again, softer this time. Leela hesitated, her fingers tightening around the fork. "Social services," she said finally. "They came to the shelter last month. Said I wasn't a broken bar stable. Said they'd find a better home for her." Her voice broke, and she looked down at Ellie, tears spilling over. "She's my baby. I'd die for her." Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew the system's flaws, knew it often failed the people it was meant to help. He'd seen it firsthand growing up, when his own mother had fought to keep him out of foster care. What happened? he asked. "How'd you end up out here?" Leela's gaze hardened, but she didn't snap at him this time. Maybe it was the warmth of the diner, or the food in her stomach, or the fact that he hadn't called the cops. Whatever it was, she started talking. She told him about the factory job she'd lost when the plant closed, the apartment she couldn't afford after, the boyfriend who'd left when she got pregnant. She told him about the shelters, the hunger, the endless nights walking the streets to keep Ellie warm. Her voice was raw, each word a wound, but she didn't cry again. She'd spent all her tears. Ethan listened, his coffee growing cold. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When she finished, he leaned back, his mind racing. He could walk away now, pay for the meal, maybe slip her a few bucks, and go back to his life. But he knew he wouldn't. Not after seeing her hold Ellie, not after hearing her story. "I can help," he said, the words out before he could stop them. "Not just tonight. I mean a broken bar really help." Leela's eyes narrowed. "Why?" she asked again, sharper this time. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Ethan said, and he meant it. "I've got a kid, too. A son. I know what it's like to want to protect them, to feel like the world's against you. I've got resources. I can get you a place to stay, a job, whatever you need to keep her." Leela stared at him, searching his face for a lie. She didn't find one, but trust didn't come easy. "People don't just do that," she said. "Not for nothing." Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not most people." The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and outside, the rain kept falling. Leela looked down at Ellie, sleeping now, her tiny hand curled against her mother's chest. For the first time in months, Leela felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to feel, hope. But hope was dangerous, and she wasn't ready to trust it or him yet. Ethan slid a business card across the table. "My name's Ethan Vance," he said. "Call me tomorrow. I'll set something up. A place to stay, no strings. You don't have to decide now." Leela took the card, her fingers brushing the embossed letters. She didn't say thank you. She wasn't the waiter, but she nodded, tucking the card into her pocket. Ethan paid the bill, left a generous tip, and stood. "Stay as long as you want," he said, glancing at the waitress. "It's covered." The city was a beast of concrete and glass, its pulse throbbing through the rain that fell in relentless sheets. Under the sagging awning of a shuttered deli, Leela hunched against the cold, her thin frame trembling as the damp seeped into her bones. Her dark hair clung to her face, matted with rain and grime, and her hazel eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, scanned the street with a mix of fear and defiance. In her arms, cradled so tightly it was as if she could shield her from the world's cruelty, was Ellie, her 6-month-old daughter. The baby's tiny body was swaddled in a fraying blanket, her soft breaths a fragile rhythm against the storm's roar. Leela whispered to her, words lost in the wind, promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The neon glow of the city cast jagged shadows, and Leela's heart lurched as a police cruiser slowed near the curb, its lights slicing through the downpour. She pressed herself deeper into the corner of the awning, her arms tightening around Ellie. "Please," she murmured, her voice raw and desperate, "please don't take my baby." The words were a plea to no one, to the universe, to the faceless system that had been circling her like a vulture. The cruiser lingered, its engine a low growl, then moved on, swallowed by the night. Leela's breath hitched, relief warring with the dread that never left her. They'd be back. They always came back. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, her stomach a hollow ache that she ignored for Ellie's sake. Her milk was drying up, and the thought of her daughter going hungry again was a knife in her chest. The shelters had turned her a wire too full, too chaotic, or unwilling to take a mother with an infant. "No kids," one worker had said, avoiding her eyes. Begging had yielded a few dollars, a crumpled bill here, a handful of coins there, but never enough. The city was indifferent, its people rushing past with downcast eyes or distracted phones. Leela's gaze drifted to the towering glass building across the street, its sleek facade glowing with the promise of warmth and safety. The sign read Vance Enterprises, a name that meant nothing to her but felt like a mockery of everything she'd lost. She kissed Ellie's forehead, whispering, "We're gonna make it, baby, I swear. High above, in a penthouse office that overlooked the city's sprawling chaos, Ethan Vance stood by a window, his reflection a ghost against the storm. At 36, he was the picture of success, a self-made millionaire, CEO of Vance Enterprises, a man who turned a scrappy startup into a tech empire. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, his tailored suit pristine despite the late hour, but his grey eyes held a weariness that wealth couldn't erase. 3 years ago, he'd lost his wife, Sarah, to a drunk driver, leaving him to raise their 4-year-old son, Noah, alone. Everything he did at a late night, the high-stakes deals, the relentless grinder was for Noah. But tonight, with his son at home with the nanny, Ethan felt the weight of his empty office, the silence louder than the rain. He was about to leave, his leather briefcase snapped shut, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. Below, under the deli's awning, a figure huddled, clutching something close. A woman, he realized, and a child. His chest tightened. He knew the city's underbelly had grown up in its shadows, scraping by in a world that didn't care. He'd seen people like her before, invisible to most, but something about the way she held her child, the way her body seemed to defy the storm, rooted him to the spot. Ethan grabbed his overcoat and headed for the elevator. His assistant, Carla, looked up, surprised. "Mr. Vance, the quarterly report, sir." "Tomorrow," he said, his voice firm but not harsh. Carla nodded, used to his decisiveness. Ethan didn't explain himself. He never did. Outside, the rain hit him like a wall, soaking his coat and hair in seconds. He crossed the street, his polished shoes splashing through puddles, and approached the awning. Leela's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. She scrambled to her feet, clutching Ellie so tightly the baby whimpered. "Stay back," she said, her voice sharp despite its tremble. "I'm not hurting anyone." Ethan stopped, hands raised, rain dripping from his face. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, keeping his tone calm, the way he spoke to Noah during a tantrum. "I saw you from my office. You looked like you could use some help." Leela's eyes darted over his expensive coat, his clean-shaven face, the confidence of a man who belonged in the glowing towers. She didn't trust him. Men like him didn't stop for women like her. "We're fine," she said, but her voice cracked, and Ellie's cries grew louder, a piercing reminder of the cold seeping into their bones. "You're not fine," Ethan said gently, taking a cautious step closer. "It's freezing out here, and your baby. Don't you dare talk about my baby." Leela's voice rose, raw and fierce. "You don't know us. You don't know anything." Tears spilled down her cheeks, indistinguishable from the rain. "They're gonna take her. They keep trying to take her." "Who's trying to take her?" Ethan asked, his brow creasing. Leela's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan had grown up on the edges of the system, watching it swallow friends and neighbors. Social services, underfunded and overstretched, often saw taking a child as the easiest fix. He didn't know her story, but he knew the fear in her eyes. "Look," he said, softening his voice, "I'm not with them. I just want to help. There's a diner a block away. Let me get you something to eat, somewhere warm to sit. No strings attached." Leela stared at him, her instincts screaming to run, but her body was exhausted, her arms aching from holding Ellie so long. The baby's cries were desperate now, and the thought of her suffering another minute in the cold broke Leela's resolve. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would you care?" Ethan hesitated, rain streaming down his face. He wasn't a hero, wasn't the type to play savior. But the way she held her daughter, the raw love in her defiance, reminded him of Sarah, of the way she'd fought for Noah until her last breath. He couldn't walk away. "Because I can," he said simply. "Please, let me help." Leela's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. She nodded, a small, reluctant gesture, and followed him, keeping her distance. The diner, a greasy spoon called Joe's, was a beacon of warmth, its neon sign flickering through the storm. Inside, it smelled of coffee and bacon, and Leela hesitated at the door, clutching Ellie. Ethan held it open, his expression steady. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Barb, didn't flinch at Leela's soaked clothes or Ethan's dripping coat. "Booth in the corner," she said, waving them toward the back. Leela slid into the seat, Ellie still pressed against her chest, and Ethan ordered coffee, pancakes, and soup without asking. "Eat what you want," he told Leela. "It's on me." Leela didn't touch the food at first, her eyes scanning the room for threats. But when the pancakes arrived, warm and golden, her hunger won out. She tore off a small piece, chewed it slowly, then softened another for Ellie, feeding her carefully. Ethan watched, his coffee untouched, saying nothing. "What's her name?" he asked after a long silence. "Ellie," Leela said, her voice softening as she looked at her daughter. "Her name's Ellie." "She's beautiful," Ethan said, and he meant it. The baby's dark eyes, so like her mother's, held a quiet resilience. Leela's lips twitched, almost a smile. "She's all I've got," she said, her voice breaking. "They keep saying I can't take care of her, but I can. I just need a chance." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Who's a they?" he asked again, his tone gentle but insistent. Leela's fingers tightened around her fork. "Social services," she said finally. "They came to the shelter a few weeks ago. Said I wasn't a broken bar fit. Said they'd find a better home for her." Her voice cracked, and she looked down at Ellie, tears falling. "She's my baby. I'd do anything for her." Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew the system's failures, had seen it tear families apart when he was a kid. "What happened?" he asked. "How'd you end up out here?" Leela hesitated, but the warmth of the diner, the food in her stomach, loosened her guard. She told him about the diner job she'd lost when it closed, the eviction that followed, the boyfriend who'd vanished when she got pregnant. She spoke of the shelters, the hunger, the nights spent walking to keep Ellie warm. Her voice was raw, each word a scar, but she didn't cry again. She'd run out of tears long ago. Ethan listened, his coffee cold. When she finished, he leaned back, his mind racing. He could pay for the meal, slip her some cash, and walk away. But he knew he wouldn't. "I can help," he said, the words spilling out. "Not just tonight. I mean really help." Leela's eyes narrowed. "Why?" she asked, sharper now. "What do you want?" "Nothing," Ethan said, and he meant it. "I've got a son. I know what it's like to want to protect your kid. I've got resources. I can get you a place to stay, a job, whatever you need to keep her." Leela studied him, searching for a lie. She didn't find one, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "People don't do that," she said. "Not for free." Ethan met her gaze. "I'm not most people." He slid a business card across the table. "Ethan Vance," he said. "Call me tomorrow. I'll set something up. A place to stay, no strings. You don't have to decide now." Leela took the card, her fingers brushing the embossed letters. She didn't say thank you, but she nodded, tucking it into her pocket. Ethan paid the bill, left a generous tip, and walked back into the rain. Leela watched him go, the card heavy in her hand. She didn't know if she'd call, but for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something dangerous, hope. 3 months later, the city's pulse felt different to Leela. The rain still fell, but she watched it from the window of a small apartment, its walls plain but clean, its warmth a stark contrast to the streets she'd left behind. The place wasn't Muka. 2 rooms, a narrow kitchen, a second-hand couch with a faint stain, but it was hers, and Ellie's crib stood proudly by the window, the baby sleeping soundly under a new blanket. Ethan had made it happen, just as he'd promised that rainy night. A lease in her name, a job at one of his company's distribution centers, a daycare voucher for Ellie. He hadn't asked for anything in return, hadn't even checked in after that first week when he'd handed her the keys and said, "You're stronger than you think." Leela hadn't believed him then, but she was starting to. The job wasn't glamorous, sorting packages, scanning barcodes, long hours on concrete floors, but it paid enough for rent, groceries, and a few small toys for Ellie. Her coworkers were decent, some even kind, sharing snacks or asking about her daughter without judgment. Ellie was thriving, her cheeks fuller, her giggles brighter, her dark eyes sparkling with curiosity. Leela still woke some nights, heart pounding, certain someone was coming to take her baby. But the fear was fading, replaced by a quiet pride. She was doing it. She was keeping her promise. Ethan, meanwhile, couldn't shake the memory of that night. He didn't tell Anania, not Carla, not his board, not even Noah, who'd noticed his dad's distracted silences and asked, "Are you sad, Daddy?" Ethan would ruffle his son's hair and say, "Just thinking, buddy." He'd check in with the distribution center's manager, casually asking about the new hire. Leela was reliable, the manager said, a hard worker who kept to herself but always showed up early. It made Ethan smile, but he kept his distance. She didn't need him meddling. Still, he thought about her more than he expected. The way she'd stood in the rain, fierce despite her fear, reminded him of Sarah, who'd once faced down a hospital bureaucracy to get Noah the care he needed. Ethan wasn't naive. He knew helping Leela didn't erase his own grief or fill the void Sarah had left him, but it felt like a step towards something. Redemption, maybe, or just proof that he could still do something good. One evening, as he left his office, he saw her across the street, pushing a stroller. Leela looked different, cleaner, her hair in a neat ponytail, her shoulders straighter. Ellie was bundled in a puffy jacket, waving a rattle with delight. Leela glanced up, saw him, and froze. For a moment, neither moved, the city's hum fading into the background. Then she crossed the street, her steps cautious but purposeful. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, stopping a few feet away. Her voice was steady now, no trace of that night's desperation. "The apartment, the job, everything." "I know," Ethan said, hands in his pockets, rain starting to speckle his coat again. "But I wanted to." Leela studied him, her eyes still wary but softer, searching for the catch that never came. "Why?" she asked, the same question from that night, but this time it carried curiosity, not suspicion. Ethan hesitated, his breath visible in the chilly air. He could have said something about charity, about giving back, but that wasn't the truth, not the whole truth. "Because you reminded me of someone," he said finally. "Someone who fought like hell for what mattered. And because Ellie deserves a mom who gets a fair shot." Leela's eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. She looked down at Ellie, who was babbling happily, then back at Ethan. "I didn't think people like you existed," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Thank you." Ethan nodded, a half-smile breaking through. "You're doing the hard part," he said. "I just opened a door." They stood there a moment, the rain picking up, a silent understanding passing between them. Leela had expected strings, demands, some hidden agenda, but Ethan hadn't asked for anything, and not a favor, not gratitude, not even a follow-up. It unsettled her, in a way. This kindness without a price. She'd spent so long bracing for betrayal that trust felt like a foreign language. "I got the job because of you," she said, almost accusingly, as if testing him. "They wouldn't have hired me without your say-so." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe, but you kept it because of you. They tell me you're one of their best." Leela's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, unused to praise. "I'm just a broken bar trying to do right by her," she said, glancing at Ellie. "She's all I've got." "I get it," Ethan said, his voice softening. "I've got a son, Noah, 4 years old. Everything I do is for him." Leela's gaze flicked back to him, curiosity sparking. "You're a dad?" "Yeah," Ethan said, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "He's a handful, but he's my world." For the first time, Leela smiled, a small, tentative thing, but real. "Bet he's lucky to have you." Ethan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know about that. I'm figuring it out as I go." The rain was falling harder now, and Leela adjusted the stroller's canopy to shield Ellie. "I should get her home," she said, but she hesitated, like she wasn't ready to end the moment. "You ever a broken bar need someone to talk to about the dad thing, I'm around. I owe you that much." Ethan's smile widened, surprised by the offer. "I might take you up on that," he said. "But you don't owe me anything." Leela nodded, her expression unreadable. She turned the stroller, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. "You're wrong, you know," she said. "I owe you everything." She walked away, her figure fading into the city's blur, Ellie's rattle a faint jingle against the rain. Ethan stood there, rain soaking through his coat, feeling something shift inside him. He'd helped her because he could, because it was right, but he hadn't expected it to change him. Yet here he was, standing in the same storm that had brought them together, feeling a little less alone. Back at his apartment, Noah was waiting, sprawled on the couch with a coloring book, his nanny tidying up in the kitchen. "Daddy." Noah launched himself at Ethan, who caught him in a hug, ignoring the wet coat. "You're all rainy." "Yeah, buddy," Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. "Just got caught in the storm." That night, as he tucked Noah into bed, Ethan thought about Leela and Ellie, about the life they were building from the ashes of nothing. He didn't know if he'd see her again, didn't know if their paths would cross beyond a chance meeting. But he knew he'd carry that night in the diner with him, a reminder that even in a city that chewed people up, there were moments of grace, moments that could change everything. He didn't need her gratitude, didn't need her to call him a hero. What he needed, or what he'd found there, was a glimpse of the man he wanted to be, not just for Noah, but for a world that needed more than money and power. As he turned off Noah's light and closed the door, the rain still falling outside, Ethan felt a quiet resolve. He'd keep opening doors, for Leela, for others, for himself. Because sometimes, that's what it took to keep the beast of the city at bay.